So this is the Taste for Brains session. During this session, we're going to go over about 10-15 minutes of what Tizen is and why it's interesting to Sencha developers. And then after that, I'm going to hand it over to Andre,
Hi. Yep.
who is a Sencha developer who has written a zombie game app that runs on Tizen. So if you have any questions, feel free to stop us at any point during the presentation. And here we go. So Tizen, how many of you have actually stopped by the booth and know what Tizen is, first of all? Most of you. OK, I'll go through this quickly then. So Tizen is an open source platform that uses HTML5 as its native application framework. So for you, what that means is that if you're writing Sencha Touch apps, you can deploy it onto Tizen, and they work without changes. And actually, if there are changes that you ran into, I'd be very interested in talking about it. But just from looking at your code, it looked like straight Sencha code.
Yeah.
So it's standards-based, based on the W3C standards. And we have it available for different verticals. What that means in business speak is there's the core OS, there's the WebKit layers, and then the UI can be customized for different touch devices. So initially, our phone devices, Samsung has announced that they're bringing out a phone later this year. And then after that will be the in-vehicle entertainment systems and information systems, often referred to as IVI, in-vehicle infotainment system. IVI systems, Nissan and Jaguar have both said that they're going to be putting out Tizen in-vehicle systems. What? Toyota. Oh, Pete said Jaguar, too. That was at the Tizen conference. OK, so, and Toyota. The operating system is open source in governance, which means that there's no one single entity that controls it. Google doesn't control it. Apple doesn't control it. Intel doesn't control it. Samsung doesn't control it. But rather, it's an association of people that do this. And there's, I don't know what the current number is, but last I heard, 27 members. In the association, this is basically an association for large industry-type players that want to be recognized as part of Tizen. So in addition to the association, there's also the community groups that interact with Tizen as well. So some of the people that are in the association, there's Orange, which is a carrier over in Europe. There's Docomo carriers in Japan, Panasonic, Huawei, Sprint here in the US, Telefonica. I could go on. There are a number of big carriers and device manufacturers who are in the Tizen Association. So this is my little shout out to our friends at BlackBerry, who said that they had the highest HTML5 score at a 485. Tizen actually currently has a 492. To a certain extent, we're spitting at nickels at this point because the highest score in this test is 500. But both, Tizen is a highly compliant HTML5 environment, both by the HTML5test.com scores and also the ring mark. Ring mark was popularized by Facebook, right? So ring mark says that if you are a ring 0 OS, you support certain core features. If you're ring 1, you support a greater set. If you're ring 2, you support an even greater set. Tizen supports all 3 rings. We top out the score. So one web API runs across all the different touch profiles. So it's one web API for phones, for tablets, for smart TVs, for in-vehicle systems, for other types of touch devices. What this does is it ensures portability. So if you write an app for a phone, you can also take that same app and move it to a tablet or a smart TV. The way in which we ensure that applications do run across different devices is through the Tizen compliance specification. There's one for applications, and there's one for device manufacturers. Device manufacturers have to do certain things to call their phone a Tizen phone. And then application developers need to build their apps in certain ways, certain directory structures. There's certain standard ways to create a Tizen application that will run on a Tizen device. So Intel is very active in the W3C. I think we're in, it's between 12 and 15 working groups working to push web standards. So we're very active there. Even though Tizen is a highly compliant HTML5 environment, there are obviously a lot of things that HTML5 doesn't do right now. A lot of those things are often around devices and device security. So for instance, you might not want your web application to be able to have access to your contacts. So the way that Tizen deals with that is that if you create an application that is not signed, you're given a default security model of a standard web application. And APIs, such as contacts management, media, geolocation, well, actually, no, geolocation is available in standard HTML5. But Bluetooth, NFC, these things aren't available. If you sign your application with your own developer private key, then you get access to the JavaScript API that gives you direct access to the hardware layers. So from your HTML5 app, you can pair with Bluetooth. You can use NFC. You can manage your application lifecycle. So you can launch your application, pause your application, listen for events that are changing. So these typical functions that are usually considered device and mobile specific, you have access to. If you're familiar with PhoneGap, how many know what PhoneGap is? OK, good, good, good. So PhoneGap has native Tizen support. So if you're using PhoneGap in your apps, you can use those APIs in order to talk to the Tizen hardware. The Tizen APIs actually have a superset or a larger set of APIs than PhoneGap, but all the PhoneGap APIs are available in the Tizen API set. You can also do things like access the battery, access your telephone calls, access your calendars. Those sorts of things are available in the APIs. So new APIs are only added in Tizen if there's no W3C standard available so far. And then Intel and the Tizen Association at large works within the W3C to try and get these application APIs put into next generation web standards. So if you want to access an API that isn't currently a W3C API, it's available to you in JavaScript under an object called the Tizen object. So you'd call Tizen applications or Tizen calendar or Tizen NFC in order to get access to those particular APIs. And like I said, we work within the W3C in order to make sure that areas that aren't yet covered for applications in HTML5 will be covered in the future. HTML5 is the primary development environment. It's widely adapted. It has a flexible distribution model. Let me talk a little bit about the flexible distribution model. Because Tizen is open source, that means that you as a developer can grab an OS image, grab the SDK, which are the tools, the editors, the simulators, the debuggers. You can modify them. You can run them. Device manufacturers can start building devices. They can take test boards and put Tizen on it and create their own devices using Tizen. Most of these devices will be touch-based devices because Tizen is a touch-based OS. But it gives people in the industry the freedom to experiment with new device types and to innovate without having to go through a single company that would dictate terms to them. So it's open source. It has a powerful web and multimedia experience. It has its own themed set. So there is a set of Tizen design guidelines, which will help you in building a native Tizen app. There are a number of graphical features. There's fonts that are specific to Tizen that just really look sharp on Tizen phones. So if you're interested in that, check out the UI guidelines. Here's the architecture. So it's a quick high-level overview of the architecture. At the bottom is the Linux kernel. The Linux kernel, the security model uses SMAC, which is simple mandatory access controls. They're part of the Linux kernel, and they segregate applications. So there's application sandboxing that provides security when you're working with web applications. Just above that are the base systems and libraries. So things like graphics and UIs, multimedia, messaging. Messaging includes SMS, MMS, email services. Security, that's SMAC. You have your base system libraries, your connectivity, which is 3G, Wi-Fi, NFC, Bluetooth, and others depending on the phone and carriers. PIM, that's all your address contacts, things like that. On top of that, you have WebKit, and you have a native framework. The native framework is written using C++, and it's very familiar to Bada developers. The APIs are very similar. The web framework is familiar to all of you. And on top of that, you build web and native applications. So I'm going to go over those in just a bit here. One thing that I did not put in this particular presentation, because to my horror, I found out at 9 o'clock that my presentation had been corrupted, and I had to rebuild it this morning. So I left out a slide on the Tizen store, which is currently up and running. You can get to it at seller.tizenstore.com, I believe. But just search for Tizen Store and you'll find it. We're currently accepting applications, and currently there is a large competition that's going on with a prize pool of $4 million. So there are different app categories. You can take a look on the web for all the details. But right now, Tizen is a fairly new operating system. You have a chance to be, the first application in your category in some cases. So go there, check out the rules, see if your application qualifies, put it on the Tizen store, and claim a prize. I met one person here at the conference who's planning on, he's got a 5-person startup, and they've already got a Sencha Touch app. He said, I'm going to move it over to Tizen, apply for a prize, and use some of that money to seed my startup. So I said, good for you. Tizen.org is the place to go if you want to find community, events, promotions. If you click on, up here at the top, other Tizen sites, it's kind of hidden away. You'll also find the developer site. How am I doing for time?
Yeah, probably.
Probably you need to wrap it up? OK. The meat of the course is the Sencha app. So at Tizen community, you'll find everything you normally find with open source communities, IRC, mailing lists, wikis, bug trackers. If you go to development.tizen.org, we have documentation. There's the UX guide you see over on the left-hand side. The developer's guide, which includes tutorials and API references. And then articles. I really suggest you take some time to look through the articles, because there's a lot of interesting articles that are kind of buried away in that section. A lot of them contain sample source code that you can use to jumpstart your application. And then the third site that's available from other Tizen sites is source.tizen.org. And that is for device manufacturers and people who are interested in hacking away at the OS itself. So there's documentation and source code that you can download here. This is a picture of the Tizen IDE. It's based on Eclipse. It has a lot of OS simulating, emulating, and debugging tools. Are there any questions before I hand it over to Andrea? It's a downloadable Eclipse runtime. It's not an Eclipse plugin. All right. I'll hand it over to Andrea.
Cool. Thanks. Thanks, Daniel. OK, so hi, everybody. We are really excited today to share with you guys what we are working on in the past months. Because developing this game, we wanted really to shake up your creativity, but also give you a clear idea of how easy, fast, but also fun is to create HTML5-based game with Sencha Touch for Tizen devices. But actually, we wanted to do more than this, because our final goal was not just to create the game, showcase it, and eventually let it die in the future. But with this game, we also wanted to give to you developers a real and concrete opportunity to play with the game, but also to experiment with the code, so that you can change any part of it. So if you want to integrate new assets or developing new features, or also a brand new battle system, you're totally free to do that, because this game will be released for open source really soon. So we are really looking forward to see what you can create with that. And we are really encouraging you to share your work after you have created something new, right? So because it will be harder for you to see the application running on the devices, we decided to record a short movie which show how the game works on Tizen devices, okay? And then we will go into a much more low-level discussion, talking about how the technologies works together and how was possible for us to create this game, right? So let's take a look at the video first. Okay, so we have two Tizen devices here. I pick up the first one, and when I open the game, immediately the application shows up a view which allows the user to select a dummy user from the list. It works in a kind of login view, but this is just temporarily because we want to replace this stuff with the Facebook login, so you can log in with your Facebook account. So let's suppose I log in with Andrea here. You can see this really neat and cool home view, which uses some CSS3 animations. On the home view, you have 3 buttons. So I've just tapped on the last one, which brings you into a section which explains you how to play this game. Something really easy, some basic instruction on how to play with other players. And then when you want to create a new game, just tap on the New Game button, and the application shows up this view where you need to provide some game configuration. So for instance, the time limit from 5 up to 20 minutes, and then just give a name to the game. So let's suppose Sencha. I apologize, but I require some time to type it correctly. So, okay, so first there is the Sencha Cob, and then, okay, Sencha Cob. And then user has 2 possibilities here. So if you want to invite some friends, you can just tap on the Invite Players button, or eventually you can just start a game and wait for other players to join your game, right? But I want to showcase how the Invite Players features works here. So as soon as I click on the on the Invite Players, the application shows up this view where are listed all the connected players. So you can eventually choose another player to invite to this game. No connected devices. There are no connected devices at this moment, so the list is just empty. So I pick up the other device. I select Bonnie this time. You can see that on Andrea's device, now we see Bonnie. So I just need to select her from the list and press on the Select button. And on Bonnie device will be shown a sort of Facebook notification, okay, which tell to her who invited her to join which game. So some basic information, so she can decide if she wants to accept or decline the invite. So I want to accept the invite. You can see that immediately both the devices will be brought into this players view where all the players are listed. And only on Andrea's device, the application shows up the Start Game button because Andrea was the creator of this game. So he's the only player which has the privilege to start a game. And when I click on the Start the Game button, both the devices, in this case both, but if there was many players, all the devices will be synchronized at the same time, so the game starts on all the devices. At the bottom, you have some timeout running, because actually, let me just stop 1 second. So basically, okay, let's go a little bit back. Okay. Okay, so you see that in the players view, we have some players which are highlighted in green and other in blue, right? This is because players can be a zombie or a human. Zombies are lighted in green, while humans are in blue. Okay? So in this case, because Andrea started the game, Andrea starts as a zombie, and Bonnie is the human. Okay? And the game works that zombies has a limited amount of time to find a human to battle with. Otherwise, zombies are disqualified from the game, okay? And human turns into a zombie, okay? And when a zombie battles a human, if the human loses the battle, the human turns into a zombie, okay? Otherwise, nothing changes. So human will be human, zombie will remain, human will turn into zombie. No, sorry, human will be human and zombie will remain human, right? Okay, so, okay. When two players want to fight, want to battle, okay, they only need to use the NFC feature and tag each other devices. You see here that the application shows up this view where the players can select a weapon. So humans have some kind of weapons and zombies some other kind. It's just like the rock, paper, scissors game with just not conventional weapons, okay? So you see that the devices are synchronized at the same time. So it's pretty fun to play. In this case, we only have 2 players because, you know, we only had 2 devices, but the game can be up to 20, 30 people, whatever you want. So in this case, in the first battle, Bonnie lost the game, so she turned into a zombie, and Andrea turned into a human. But if we start another battle, okay, so the zombie lose the game, so nothing changed here. And Andrea is still the human, right? So let me just speed up the video here, just to reach out the end of the game. And as I already said, this battle system can eventually be changed. You can also add new weapons. You can create a new battle system, whatever you want, because it will be open source. So it's totally up to you. So you see here that none of the players was able to find another player to battle with. So in this case, Bonnie was disqualified from the game. So because Andrea was the only player left in the game, the game ends, okay? And you see here that the application is checking the scores. And in this case, because Bonnie was disqualified, Andrea is the winner. So the application shows up this last view, where are listed all the players and who won the game. And that's all. Really cool, huh? So, yeah. Right.
You know, basically want to showcase a couple of device-specific APIs, and then go do something with this code and submit it to the challenge. This gives you kind of a base to go do it. Whether you work for, you know, a company doing enterprise, this, you know, you have like a head start, and I don't think a lot of folks outside of the Sencha conference are going to know about this game.
Right.
So this is a very select group. You guys have an opportunity to have a head start with gaming.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, do you have a question? The communication when the players need to fight are through NFC. Yeah, but some other stuff are going through an API that we have created, but I will talk briefly about that. So now that we have a clear understanding of how the application works and which features we needed to provide in order to be able to create this game, we can now go into a much more low-level presentation, talking more about some of these features and digging more into the application code, just to give you a clear idea of how actually easy it was to create this game. So we will start looking at the required technologies that we have used to create this game. I will spend some words talking about the extendable game interface that we have created for you, so that will be really easy for you to develop an entirely new battle system. And I will also talk about how to use the NFC feature thanks to the Tizen framework. Some words about the spooky look and feel that we have created for this app, just to give this application a bit of personality. And we have some time for some Q&A at the end. But before doing that, let me spend just a couple of words about me. So I'm Andrea Camarata. I'm a Sencha solution engineer since November 2011, so it's almost 2 years. As you probably already noticed, I'm not a native English speaker, so in fact, I'm based in Italy currently. I have 6 years of working experience with Sencha's product, and I'm an XMPP protocol expert, so I really enjoy creating this sort of application which requires this kind of real-time communication. So if you want to look for some of my other works, you can just search for RLCMS on Vimeo and YouTube. And I also have a website where sometimes I write some tutorials on how to get started with Sencha Touch. So if you want to check it out, you're totally free to do that. So going back to our presentation, let's talk a little bit more about the technologies. So to create this game, we needed to work on both the server side and on the client side. So you can see from this slide, on the server side, we needed to create this cloud API, which are needed to bring the real-time communication within the app. So what you need to know about this API is that these API are HTML5 WebSocket based. So this gives you a clear understanding of how it was possible for us to allow players to communicate in real time. And the API are written in Node.js and MongoDB, just to have a small database. While on the client side, we have used Sencha Touch, obviously. And Sencha Touch was used to create everything you may think about this application. So from the user interface to the game logic, and also to the spooky look and feel, because thanks to the SaaS support, it is really easy to create this kind of cool stuff, this kind of original views. And last but not least important, the Tizen framework, which works really great on Tizen devices and allows developers to access to some native device functionalities, like access to the camera, or as you already saw in this game, to access to the NFC sensor. So we are really happy about how the Tizen framework works, because it's really easy to use and it works really great. So just a couple of words more about the Cloud API. So you can see here that I have one device, right? So as soon as the user opens the application, immediately the Sencha Touch sends a background request to the Cloud API, sending a connection request and broadcasting all the information related to the user, so the username and other stuff like the city, when the Facebook login will be in place, will be transmitted some other kind of information. And immediately the Cloud API, when get the request, will broadcast the same information to all the other connected devices, so that eventually other users will be able to understand that I'm currently online and eventually be able to join a game, right? If another player, when I want to create a new game, just tap on the Start Game button, and the application shows out this view where you need to type some configuration params. And when you're done, just tap on the Start Game button, and the Sencha Touch application will send dedicated message channel request subscription. So basically, when more than one users join the same game, they are automatically subscribed to some dedicated channels so that this kind of JSON packet can be delivered only to the people which has joined to the same game, instead of looping through all the players, and deliver a single message to everybody. So it works really great. And also, because we have created a new game, we also created a ext data store plugin, which actually allowed us to synchronize the data of the store to all the connected devices. So as soon as I add a new record to the store, the record information will be broadcasted to all the connected devices so that other players will be able to see my game and eventually join it, right? In fact, if another player wants to join my game, let's suppose Heil, okay? Heil needs to, everything works in the same way. So the application sends the connection request, and when Heil wants to join my game, it just needs to tap on the join game button, and the application shows up a list with all the available games. So you only need to select the Andreas game in this case, and both will be bringed into the same dedicated message channel, right? If another player wants to join, let's suppose Bonnie, everything works in the same way, but as I already said, only Andrea has the privilege to start a game, right? So, talking about the extendable game interface, so basically, in our application, we have a controller, which is the battle controller, which on its initialization listens for some application events. So, for instance, the battle start, the end, the win, the lose, the tie, and finally the score. So these events are enough to cover an entire game situation, right? So, in fact, we also created the rock, paper, scissors controller, which extends the battle controller, and we also just needed to override the function that we needed for this game. So we just overrided the onBattleStart function. You can see here that the code is pretty easy. So what is important here is that basically when the battle starts, when two devices has been tagged through the NFC sensor, the application shows up the view which allows the user to select his weapon, looking at the player race. So if it's a human, just take the weapons view for the human, otherwise takes the one for the zombie and show it on the screen. It's really simple. And when the weapon is selected, just save the weapon into the controller. You see that on the second line. And then, thanks to the Cloud API, will be sent a message to our opponent player, broadcasting the selected weapon and the command player weapon selected, okay? So after that, the other device will be able to get the weapon, So here, you see that always in the rock, paper, scissors controller, we listen also for the player weapon selected event, okay? So on the other device, when this application event is fired, basically, you can see at the bottom, the weapon that was received is saved into the controller, and then it's called the detect battle winner function, which basically look at the weapon that was selected by us, and by the opponent. So supposing that I'm the human, if my weapon is the shotgun and the opponent weapon is the bash, so just fire the application events which say that I'm the winner, okay? Otherwise, if I selected the shotgun and the opponent selected the vomit, so it's a tie. Otherwise, I just lose the game, right? This is just a short version of the original function, but the concept is pretty the same. Talking about the NFC feature, we also have created a an application controller, which is the NFC controller, which exposes 3 different functions, so the initialization, the power on, and the power off, right? So on the initialization, basically, we just call the Tizen.nfc get default adapter, okay? And we save it directly inside the application object, inside the NFC adapter variable, so that this sensor, this object will be available from anywhere within the app, so from the controller, from the view, wherever you want, right? So they can be accessible from anywhere. And the power on function just called the set power function on the NFC adapter object we just got, passing by the onFC power on and the onFC power on fails function. We will look at the onFC power on function in the following slide. And for the power off, we just call the same function, passing by the false Boolean value. So it's pretty easy to turn on or power off, the NFC sensor. So the NFC power on function, basically, we have some variables definition at the top. But what is important here is the set per listener function, because here we pass by 2 different functions, so the onAttach and onDetach. So basically, the onAttach function is fired. It's called when 2 devices has been tagged each other, right? And the onDetach when they detach. And on the onAttach function, we just create a new data structure which is required to pass some data through the NFC sensor. And we broadcast the device ID, our device ID, because every player will be identified univocally by a device ID. It's basically a string. So that when the 2 devices tag each other, the other player will be able to understand which player he is fighting with, right? So we create this data structure passing by the device ID, and then we just send it through the NFC sensor. And when the opponent receives the device ID, basically here we fire another application event, which is the NFC tag function, sending the device ID. So the application will automatically show the views that will allow the user to start a battle, select the weapon, and everything. So it's pretty easy to create, to use the NFC sensor. So as I already said, we just wanted to give some personality to this application. So we just enjoyed to play a little bit with SAS. So as you saw, the home view is pretty different from all the other views that you probably already seen made by Sencha Touch, right? We wanted to create this spooky looking field, so we decided to create this view in a sort of layers way, so that every asset is just a layer placed on the top of each other. Okay, so for instance, we have the static background image, which is actually the only image that doesn't move in the home view. Then we have the sun here, the far cityscape, the closer width. Then we have just the logo and some action buttons at the bottom, right? And how was possible for us to create this view? Well, looking at the JavaScript code, you can see here, before to go deeper with this, how many of you have experience with Sencha Touch? Okay, cool. So basically here, you can see that the home view is nothing more than ext container, right? And we have just overridden the getElementConfig function, defining some children, right? So we have many children as, we have a children for every layer, right? So for instance, we have the sun. The first one is the sun, then we have the logo, the city, and the width. And then we, because this is a container, we needed to keep the inner element. Otherwise, we had no way to show this action button at the bottom. And you see that every layers has two different classes. So the sun has also the X overlay class, same for the city and the width. So this is because if we look at the SAS definition, you can see that at the top, we have created this WebKit animation, which is basically named slide to left, which moves the background image from position 0 to minus 400. And the X overlay class basically contains some default value for the animation. So basically, it used an absolute positioning, and it used the same animation that we have created on top, giving some default animation speed, which is set to 60 seconds. And then the X width use the same animation, but with just 40, the animation will be long, just 40 seconds, and the X sun will be 140 seconds, just to give some, just to move these layers at different phases, right? Something really simple. And so this is for the layers. For the background, basically what is important here, so okay, we have the buttons, so the one for the new game, the join game, and the help me section. What is important here is the classes array, right, on the top. You can see that we have the X simple, the X sunrise, and the X main view. So the X main view is used to give some specific styles to this particular view, while the other one works together, basically. So, in fact, if we take a look at the following slide, you see that we have the X simple class, and then at the bottom we have the X sunrise, sunset, and night. So because we needed to style this view in different ways, so there are some situations where we needed to give to some view the static looks and feel, right? So that we don't need to move anything on the view. So we just needed to have a background image which is static, so just to don't overwrite the DOM, right? And there are other cases where we wanted to create everything with the same layers way. So we have the simple class, for instance, that is used when we needed to create this layers stuff on our view. But we also have the X composite class, which use the same X sunrise, sunset, and night classes just to show the background image with no layers on the top. Looking at the weapon, we just play it. We just enjoy to create something new. So for the humans, we have the baseball bat, the chainsaw, and the shotgun. So baseball bat is the rock, chainsaw is the scissor, the shotgun is the paper. While for zombies, we have the bash, which is rock, bites, which is scissor, and vomit, which is paper. So we just enjoyed it to create something cool here. So what's next? So basically, as I already said, we want to release this game for open source. But before doing that, we also want to fix some things into the application. We want to integrate the Facebook login, and also a possibility for you to share your score when the game ends. So taking a picture of yourself, right, and share that on your and your friends' wall. And what we are expecting from you is to extend the game interface to create some other battle system. You can create whatever you want. And eventually, the new game view could be changed to allow users to select the game they want to play inside the game, right? So the battle system they want to play. And eventually, this can also be chosen randomly, right, when the user start a new game. if you want an idea for a new game, you can just think about, you can just think about trees, for instance, guess the number, Pong, whatever you want. So it's totally up to you. So we are really looking forward to see what you can create, and yeah, and that's all, right? Any questions?
Where can we get that example from?
Sorry?
Where can we get the API from?
Sorry.
Where can we get the code that you have?
It's not released actually at the moment, so really soon probably. I don't know. We have to talk with Daniel. Yeah.
When, where can I get a Tizen device to actually open this?
Well, Tizen devices are often given away at Tizen events. So if you had gone to boot camp Tuesday, they had given them out there. But otherwise, you can download the SDK. There's both a simulator for just web apps, which is simulates web apps, and there's also a full stack simulator for like a full OS.
Yep.
Would you create all the background images
Mm-hmm.
stuff? Would you better to use something like
It depends. It depends. So we decided to use this to override the get element config because we wanted to have more freedom to move these assets. You know. Yeah, but there are many solutions. So X templates could be a good solution. Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions? Okay. Thanks.